I won't waste any time talking about the lockout because I have experts here around me who are willing and happy to do that. I will start off with Malachy Steenson, a political activist and a solicitor. So Malachy, if you want to stay here or if you want to stand up, whichever.
But I'll give you what I have. I want to thank RSF for holding this event and for asking me and others to speak at it. It's important as we go through one of the most intense periods of historical revisionism that we continue to place the correct historical narrative on the events of the last century. And this will become more vital as we move towards 2016. We've even seen in recent days attempts to rehabilitate William Martin Murphy as a hero down to Cork. And as Republicans and Socialists, we have to oppose that and put the correct narrative out there. What I want to concentrate on tonight are local issues and events which occur more or less within walking distance of where we now sit. I want to talk about events which preceded 1913, which was the schoolboy strike in East Wall in 1911, the riots in general in this area where 2 people were killed, and some writing which I discovered happened in Finglas, the rural area at that time. Just over a century ago, on the 13th of September 1911, teachers arrived in East Wall, which is in Dublin Port, at the National School there, found a message on the door. Any boy caught going into school and not following other schoolboys' examples will be killed by order. Strike, strike, strike. The schoolboy strike will be gone. Their demands were very simple: shorter hours, cheaper books, and no canes. For at least 3 days, this junior industrial unrest continued, with pupils attempting to enter the school being branded as scams and pelted with stones and vegetables. Unfortunately, history records that they were unsuccessful in achieving their demands. Of course, the new ideas of trade union radicalism were spreading like wildfire in the city at the time. Largenism was about to town, and a number of important strikes had already taken place. This militancy would no doubt have seeped down to the children of Dublin workers, no more so than in the docks, and particularly in areas like East Wall, where much of the workforce were engaged in dock-related work. In his report on the strike, the school inspector said, "A good many men have been out on strike for some time in the neighbourhood of this school. The boys, on hearing about strikes from morning till night, the contagion had reached the height specified by the principal as ringleaders." This was also the opinion of the school manager, Archpriest Father Brady. When a journalist arrived from the Evening Telegraph, the boys were asked to speak at one time. He found that their knowledge of events not only in Dublin but in England was clear. There had been a series of schoolboy strikes in Wales, and the boys' demands were framed in similar terms. They were able to point out that while their parents had to pay for school books, these were free across the water. Indeed, we see now, again this month, people saying about the price of school books. We still don't have free school books here. They do have them in Britain and in the north of Ireland. Their organisational ability was an indication of things to come, and the reports in the press talked about secret meetings held in fields in the dead of night. I'm not so sure where the fields around East Wall were. It would have been fairly dockland, unless they had them on the beach. They'd organised pickets in the vicinity of the school to stop other kids who were going in to break the strike. And parents trying to force their way through with children were forced back by the strikers. They had what I suppose will be known later as flying pickets all over the place to stop kids coming in. They sent out scouts in all directions to prevent any kids coming to school. The police arrived and observed matters. Of course, we know that regularly happens anytime we go anywhere. The traditional working class hatred of scarves was evident. A newspaper report quotes a striking boy saying, "If we don't get our rights, we won't go back. And we bring out all the boys tomorrow." And now the boys who were at school in the evening, fighting talk indeed, and the black legs were pelted with stones and carrot stalks. The same journalist was told to come down at 3 o'clock and see their elbows, as their mothers were used, not in Dublin, bringing them home under their aprons. In those days, boots were expensive, just as today, and the cost of school books would have been a huge strain on families. And the reality was that if they hadn't got boots, they couldn't go to school, so most of them couldn't afford the boots, so they dropped out of school. So not alone had they no shoes, they had no boots. And just in keeping up the old north side, south side battle that generally goes on, a similar protest at City Key failed because the mothers beat the kids back to school. There were a number of incidents around the west of Ireland at the same time, in Sligo and in Loughrea, with the same demands. So that gave us an indication of young kids who are very politicised in 1911, young national school children who I would say are far more politicised than kids today, and very caught up in this celebrity culture. And I doubt very much if any of the kids today in school know anything that's going on outside of the Facebook celebrity culture that they have. Between January and August 1913, there were some 30 strikes. It really took off then on the 26th of August when the Dublin Tramway Company staff went out. Because the police, which was the DMP, the Dublin Metropolitan Police and the Royal Irish Constabulary, provided a guard for every tram. And tensions increased. There were, according to the state riots, we would say that there were attacks by the state forces on workers who were out protesting. Because the government appointed a commission to look into these so-called riots. It only took 18 days. How long did the last tribunal last? But they came to the same conclusion. And I'll go through some of the attacks in a few moments. The commissioners concluded that the police were not guilty of starting either the riot in Sackville Street on the 31st of August or in fact any of the other riots. The riot started because of an error of judgment on the part of the police. And the commissioners naturally praised the courage and patience of the police, in particular when provoked or threatened by people they described as a desperate criminal band. Sounds very like the Sobel report. East Wall, along with other Dublin communities, was at the centre of events. Dublin Port was a key battleground, and many people think, when we talk about the strikes and that it was just confined to the tram workers, and they forget that the docks was a key battleground. Just as when we saw in Britain in the miners' strike, the role that the docks played in refusing to handle coal coming in and that kind of thing, and they can have a huge influence. Many local firms and employers became involved, locking out their workers who refused to sign the pledge, and I think Des is going to deal with what the actual pledge was. The shipping companies refused to handle goods for many of the companies who had locked out their workers. Companies like Brute Thomas, Eaton's, Coal Merchants, Support and Docksport, T&C Martins. But not alone when people were locked out. A lot of people, and people look where the new market is in just as you turn for Dublin Port Tunnel. Merchants Road just before, there were houses which were built like the Ivy houses and the Ivy Trust houses, which were built for Guinness workers. They were built for the workers in T&C Martins and the other merchants' warehouses. And it meant if you were locked out of your job and you were on strike, you lost your house. So on one single day before Christmas in 1913, 62 East Wall families were evicted. You imagine if that happened now, when we're talking about a small number of evictions by the banks currently, but 62 people, families, being put out of their homes and their jobs in the weeks before Christmas. I would say I wish things have changed, but in reality, they haven't. Much of the emphasis again has been on the attacks by the police on the march or the protest, which Larkin spoke at in O'Connell Street on the 31st of August. But in fact, there was far more severe disturbances the day before, on the 30th of August, when there was a baton charge on a rally at Eden Quay, and it spread right through the city. 2 men were killed during the course of that. James Nolan, who lived at the North Strand, 8 Spring Garden Street, he was originally from Upper Gloucester Street, 17 Upper Gloucester Street. He was a married man with 5 children. Now, he got beaten across the head with a baton. He died. The inquest found that he was killed by a fracture of the skull, but they couldn't find any evidence as to who hit him. Probably hit himself. On the same night, another labourer named James Bourne, who lived at 4 Lower Gloucester Place, which is almost in the same street as James Nolan came from, he died from being beaten around the head. Again, they found no evidence to how he received these injuries. So again we see, while some things change, they don't really. They're both likely to have known each other. According to the Commissioner's report, a baton charge had taken place at Borkey on Saturday night. The crowd against which this charge was directed was very disorderly and violent, and that they had little doubt that in the course of this charge, Bourne received an injury, which led to his death. They were also of the opinion in the case of Nolan and Bourne that the crowd's conduct towards the police clearly showed to any peaceful person the danger that they ran by remaining members of this crowd. In other words, it was their own fault. And again, have we seen them saying the same thing about children shot dead by plastic bullets? Don't go about. Later the same night, crowds assembled on Marlborough Street, which is just up 100 yards from here, Talbot Street and Earl Street. The corners of streets were rushed by the police and then regrouped elsewhere and attacked the police again. So there were continual skirmishes right through the day and night. The state had banned Larkin from speaking, Larkin's rally on the next day, and that the rioting on that day came because the state moved in to arrest him. He'd been released on bail on the 28th of August, which was a couple of days before that, and he was banned from holding public meetings. He tore up the proclamation for having that. Again, you know, we see regular meetings banned which oppose the state. Many people fleeing the trouble in O'Connell Street sought refuge in the nearby balconies of corporation buildings, which is not long since gone. It's not down since about the 70s, I think, in Foley Street. And people raced into those balconies and onto those flats, and these were one of the old, they were a horrible place. You would need to see a picture of them to actually see what they were like. People lived, whole families lived in 1 or 2 rooms. Unbelievable living conditions for ordinary people. The police not being able to catch those who they were chasing naturally kicked in everybody else's door and beat up many people. In the case of one man, Michael Whelan, he, his wife and a number of visitors were violently assaulted by the police. And they hadn't even been out. He wasn't even a striker. He just happened to live in corporation buildings. There were further disturbances through the night in Gloucester Street, Waterford Street, Gardner Street, Parnell Street, George's Quay, Moss Street, Capel Street, and all of the streets around there. And these are all more or less north side streets. In this very small area between here and your own offices, more or less. But one of the things that I discovered during researching for this was it wasn't confined to here. There was a farm labourer strike in rural areas like Finglas, which was a farming area. And one of the things I came across was that there had been an attack on a farmer's farm out there. John Butterley's farm in New Park, Finglas. Some of his labourers had refused to join the strike, and in retaliation, strikers destroyed the field of cabbages and threw his agricultural tools into a drain. Now, Butterley and the Butterley family are the family who ultimately ended up owning the Stardust, which we saw their links to Fianna Fáil, and we saw that again, those in 1913 who were part of the establishment culture could do what they wanted. We saw it again in 1991, that nothing had changed. In Finglas, a skirmish or a protest happened when one of the scarabs, a fellow called Patrick Ferry, was served in a pub in the main street of Finglas. It's now the Drake Inn. He was one of the few workmen in the district who had not joined the strike. About 300 to 350 people marched on the pub. The police naturally went to protect the pub rather than to deal with the matter at hand. They armed themselves, speeches were made by members of the crowd saying that, you know, Murphy was already beaten and slightly optimistic, I suppose, stamped by Larkin, he would get them more wages. The police then fired into the crowd and 17-year-old Patrick Daly was shot in the back. The police went away and left them there and went to get more weapons. They said that they didn't know they shot him or that he'd been injured. They only found him when they came back. Later on that night, Larkin said to a crowd outside Liberty Hall, he took up the cause of Patrick Daly, and he said, and I quote, "The police were already responsible for the murder of our comrades Bourne and Nolan, and only a few hours ago they shot down young Daly like a dog. People should not give any chance to the police who are thirsty to continue their murderous assaults." However, even though the men of Finglas returned to work fairly quickly, the state didn't forget them. They all appeared in from Contra Courthouse on the 7th of November, charged with riot, unlawful assembly and assault on the police. The magistrate who heard the inquest into the police shooting in Finglas commended the police officers for their actions. He said, and I quote, "He had never come in contact with a set of circumstances that justified the police more in using deadly weapons. The young officer had performed his duty in a most humane manner." And I think, finally, the one thing I would say is I've seen a quote there from, in relation to William Martin Murphy. And it was that he wasn't opposed to unions. He had no problem in dealing with responsible unions. And I think that now we see that the successors to Connolly and Larkin's union, the transport union, SIP2, is now a responsible union, and William Martin Murphy's successors, Dennis O'Brien and Tony O'Reilly, have no difficulty in dealing with those establishment unions. And finally, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Thanks for listening.